Hello, everyone. My name is Braden. This is Airless Cool 9, and today I am joined by Crimson of Crimson Fox Games. Say hi, Crimson.
Hello.
Thank you for joining me. I appreciate the time that you've taken out of your schedule.
Absolutely. It's lovely to be here.
In today's particular video, Crimson and I are going to take a look at four stat blocks that we kind of chose together from the 2024 Monster Manual and give you our thoughts on their redesigns. And I'm quite looking forward to talking about these. Got some interesting options here.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is nice to especially go over the stat blocks that of the monsters D&D's probably most either known for or the ones that are unique to this system. It's something you can't get anywhere else.
Yeah, and there's definitely some very interesting design choices in these four stat blocks.
Yes. There's some interesting design choices, and there are some interesting design choices.
Yes, for sure, for sure. Yeah, so the first stat block that we're actually going to take a look at is the Lich, which is described as a deathless master of magic. And they've seen a variety of defensive and offensive improvements, making them quite scarier than their 2014 version, in my opinion.
Yeah. As a side note, I do actually like that every monster now has that little sentence describing them.
Yes,
Uh,
I really enjoy the like, I guess they're like epithets, just a short description of what each monster kind of entails.
yeah.
So I have both stat blocks available, but why don't you go ahead and tell me real quick, what what are the defensive and offensive challenge rating changes to these, because you did some
Yeah.
calculations.
Absolutely. So what I did is I went through each of the monsters that we're going to review today and calculated their CR of the old stat blocks and the new stat blocks using the CR calculator from the 2014 DMG. I did have to make some guesses as to what some features would translate to or be roughly equivalent to. But
Yeah.
on the whole, I think this will help give us an idea of what's changed on the back end of CR. So with the 2014 Lich, what we had was a monster that's famously quite swingy for its CR because of its pitiful hit points.
Yeah.
Which when I calculated its CR, I found that it had an offensive CR of 24 and a defensive CR of 14, which for a CR 21 is shocking. If I remember correctly, the way that I worked this out is I guessed power word kill would be roughly equivalent to 100 points of damage because it could only kill you if you had 100 hit points or less.
Yeah, makes complete sense.
And then upcasting fireball.
Yeah. Or
Um,
even finger of death is probably one of the more powerful options as well.
Shockingly, in terms of DPR anyway, because fireball is an AoE, so you
Oh, well,
count it as
yeah, for
hitting two
sure.
targets. It is the most on paper the most powerful spell the Lich could upcast at any given level aside from 9th. And it's still pretty close to power word kill if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Yeah. And even the just looking at these, the designs are really almost completely different in what each stat block can kind of do on a given turn.
Yes. Well, the removal of upcasting is very interesting. Because on
Yes.
the one hand, there's a lot of versatility lost there, but also it means that you don't kind of have to, as the DM, work out which spell you're meant to upcast. You
Mm-hmm.
just know. It will tell you.
It, in your own word, and I'm going to use the word that you use. It's a lot less swingy when you're having less options on what level to cast certain things at. If you're going to cast a spell.
Yes. But yeah, so a famously, oftentimes, monster that underperformed, especially because it had a like +3 to initiative. So it was very easy for players to beat it and blast through its pitiful 135 hit points.
Yeah.
Um, Even with its effective AC of 24, which comes from having 3 saves, which is 2 effective AC, and
Mm-hmm.
obviously being able to cast shield
Yes.
every round if it wants to. Um, but like target it with a couple of saving throws, even with its legendary resistance, it's not going to last very long. If
Uh,
you compare that to the new Lich, its defensive CR hasn't actually changed. The amount of actual damage that it does has barely gone up, 195 from 2014 to 201 in 2024. But
okay.
its defensive CR has gone from 14 to 25.
That's quite an increase.
Yeah, that's an effective 435 hit points because of its 4 legendary resistances.
Mm-hmm.
That's an effective AC of 27. Because being able to cast shield every turn and having 4 saving throw proficiencies.
Yes.
And also just having higher base health, obviously. I mean, 135 compared to
Well, yeah. It
315.
it has almost, I think, almost 2.5 times the amount of HP that the old Lich did.
Something like that.
I think it's maybe like 2.3 times or something in that range, but it's a massive increase.
Yeah. So definitely the main thing that has changed here is the defenses. Now it will survive a turn. um Especially because of its improved initiative bonus, something that's new to the 2024 Monster Manual, having initiative listed separately
Yeah.
and having it like not just come from the creature's dexterity modifier. Some monsters have proficiency or even expertise in
Yeah.
initiative.
And the Lich definitely has expertise in initiative because of that 17, which is
Yeah,
a significant amount higher than the +3 it had in the old version.
which what that means is even if your party could blast through 315 hit points in a round, probably due to having a shitload of magic items, they still have to beat the Lich to do that, which is now so much harder.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible to beat the Lich before it gets a turn now.
Yeah. It's almost guaranteed now that the Lich will get at least one turn before your party is able to wipe it out.
Yeah.
And I would imagine it's going to last at least a few more rounds because of its increased defensives.
Yes. Good luck hitting a 25 AC consistently.
And you were talking about it's having, it has 4 saving throw proficiencies now. It actually gained dex saving throws, which is quite interesting.
Yes.
Which I think is going to help.
Yeah, one thing they've done in the new monster manual that I find very helpful is a lot of monsters had odd numbered saving throws,
Mm-hmm.
which was really bizarre because in terms of how that affected their CR, there was no difference between having 3 or 4 saving throw proficiencies.
Yeah, at least
So
defensively, I guess there was no mechanical
yeah.
difference.
And what they've done in the new book is I don't think there's a single creature that has odd numbered saving throws. If they had 3, they've either gained an extra one to have 4 or lost one and gained defenses elsewhere to make up for that lost effective AC.
That is quite nice. in that case. At least for the monsters, it is. It's gonna let them
Yes.
last a little bit
Players
longer.
not so much.
Yeah, players may have a little bit harder. Uh, one of the things that I do like is that they have but from every monster that had it, they've removed the immunity to non-magical bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing,
Yeah.
or at least immunity or resistances. They've just removed it completely, and now creatures either have resistance to those the normal damage types, or they have increased hit points or AC to account for that. I feel like that's
Yes.
just a little bit easier to keep track of.
Well, not just that, it makes more sense from a mechanical perspective, because if you actually sit and think about mechanically and in terms of balance, non-magical resistance, it's fucking nonsensical. Sorry, can I swear?
Yes, you're fine.
Yeah, okay. It's fucking nonsensical, right? Because so the game was supposed to be balanced with the idea that you didn't need magic items. So what that means is, by having non-magical immunity, that's a lie. Marshals will need magic items for the most part to be able to actually do the damage they're supposed to.
And it's very likely
So
that a lot of them did have magic items, so having the resistance
Yeah.
or immunity was just completely
Useless.
Yeah, it was useless. It didn't help the
But it
defenses
was
of the creature at all.
Yeah, and it was still giving them an effective HP buff on the back end,
Mm-hmm.
to account for parties that wouldn't have magic items when facing them, and that their marshals couldn't do as much damage as they're meant to. Which is fucking insane!
Yes, it really didn't help with the balance of the game at all, and I love that they've just removed it from the game completely. I think the only monsters in the game now that have actual bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing resistance are now either ones that are somewhat incorporeal or are just powerhouses that can resist physical attacks because they're just that
I
powerful.
I think it's limited to incorporeal creatures, as you said, and titans specifically.
Oh yes,
Because if I
that makes
remember
sense.
correctly,
Because
it's the Tarask that has it, the Empyrean that has it, the Kraken might have it as well, and they're all titans.
yeah, I would have to double check on the Kraken, but yes, I do remember the Empyrean and the Tarask too. But yeah, I actually like that
definitely,
design choice.
yeah, definitely creatures that are supernaturally tough have it. Okay,
Another
the Kraken does,
yeah, the Kraken does not or does.
so it's not titans. Never
Okay,
mind.
not all Titans.
No.
I understood what you meant. But another thing that I've noticed is I really like this new I really enjoyed the new design of these monsters being a lot more powerful in their lair, and that affecting the stat block a little. Because the Lich specifically gets an additional legendary resistance and additional legendary action if you fight it in its lair. And that really does increase the power budget of the creature.
Yeah, it takes place of lair actions
Mm-hmm.
in 2014, and while having effectively an extra turn felt more impactful, it was kind of it was hard to remember because it wasn't actually in the stat block.
Yeah, because
And no other mechanic in the game functions like this.
Yeah.
So it was very strange. Whereas this is an extension of pre-existing mechanics, which I always like. Sorry, you were going to say something.
No, I was just gonna say I can't count the number of times I've just forgotten to do lair actions on initiative count 20 because I just forgot that they were a thing. But now that it's like baked into the actual stat block, it's really hard for you to forget to give this creature additional legendary resistance or an additional legendary action use.
Yeah.
And I also really appreciate that they have somewhat redesigned legendary actions to where they're now a number of uses, and every single legendary action is just a single use. They just have some of them just have a limited number of times that you can use them per turn.
Yeah. Rather than having them be this really strange resource pool where some legendary action options cost more than others, and to be honest, usually were worth less than the single action options. Like the vampire, for example, or maybe I should say specifically with Strahd's like 2014 stat block.
Yes.
He had a 2-action legendary option to bite, and it did so much less damage, even if you account for the fact that necrotic damage reduces the target's hit points and heals him. It still did less damage than doing 2 unarmed strikes.
Yeah. But then again, Strahd was just using a normal what was it, the vampire spellcaster stat block?
With some changes.
Yeah.
But like his unarmed strikes did an extra 46 necrotic damage.
Mm-hmm.
But like that design, and that's just the example off the top of my head because I am doing a Curse of Strahd campaign right now. But that sort of design, when it came to multiple action costs, was everywhere. Like, even with the Lich here, where we have Paralyzing Touch, where it costs 2 actions, or Frightening Gaze, where it costs 2 actions, or Disrupt Life, that costs 3 actions. I'm not sure I would use Disrupt Life over a Paralyzing Touch and a cantrip, or even 3 cantrips.
Yeah,
Like 3
same.
Ray of Frosts.
And I think it's really nice here as well that all of these new legendary actions, they all have different mechanics to them, but they're also reminiscent of the mechanics of the older ones. They're just designed a little bit better and more applicable.
Yes.
Like, Deathly Teleport is going to be useful all the time because I can see that Lich wanting to get out of an area and just being able to deal some damage while doing it is a nice offensive bonus.
Yeah. Well, and even teleport next to somebody and then teleport away.
Yes.
To do some damage to them. Or teleport in, disrupt life, teleport out.
And we haven't even talked about how the Lich now has essentially an unlimited number of castings of both Counterspell and Shield, since there's no per day uses on its reaction.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it can just have it can almost every round essentially have a 25 AC if it wants, which is really high.
And if your party decides to switch from attacking to saving throws, or especially spell saving throws, because they realize we're not going to hit this 25 AC, doesn't fucking matter. Counterspell, counterspell, counterspell.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. And
if this was the old counterspell, I'd find that annoying, and actually might even call that bad design. But with the new counterspell being nerfed as it is as a saving throw, where players have more control over that, they can use Heroic Inspiration, Bless, Paladin's Aura, and other buffs. I don't mind it as much that the Lich can just spam that.
No, and the new counterspell doesn't expend the spell slot that the creature, the resource that the creature uses if they're using spell slot.
Spell slots, yes.
So it's a lot more player friendly in that way,
but still powerful.
It is still powerful.
Yeah, and also mentioning that with the spellcasting changes, right?
Yes.
We've gone from this big long list of spells, which I know a lot of people are fond of. As we said, it had a lot of versatility. But first of all, look at how much bigger the 2014 Lich stat block is compared to the 2024 Lich, without actually having much more substance to it. And also, you're not gonna cast most of those spells.
No, with it, its multi-attack is actually quite potent, and I honestly only see you using your spell casting action if you really want to do something a lot more specific, because the Eldritch
Hmm.
Burst and the Paralyzing Touch attacks that they now have, which they can make 3 of in any combination, uh do decent damage, but or at least
Yeah,
the Eldritch Burst deals a significant amount for 31 average damage.
93.
Yeah, which is
Yeah.
93 damage in a turn. But the paralyzing touch as well, just automatically applying the paralyzed condition, that would really be worth it if
Yeah.
it's in melee combat with something.
One thing that I have very mixed feelings about, which the paralyzing touch is a perfect example of, is they've gotten rid of attacks that also trigger saving throws, which I
Mm-hmm.
do appreciate.
Yeah, they've
It,
done it for the most part.
yeah, I think the only example I've seen where it's still around is like the bearded devil.
Yeah.
But
Or the ghoul's claw attack.
oh, that still is a saving throw. Nice.
Yes.
Um, but one thing that I do find, because it simplifies play a lot. It limits the number of rolls you have. You no longer have to say,
Mm-hmm.
okay, do I hit? Yes, this is the damage you take. Can you make me a saving throw? And then the player has to quickly figure out what their hit points are and roll a save, and like to try and make sure they don't take up too much time.
I really
So
like
that being,
yeah,
sorry, go on.
I was gonna say I really like that it does speed up play quite a significant amount, and the fact that there is no saving throw attached to it, it really gives the player characters something to have to work around, because they're gonna realize that this is something that this creature can do, and they're gonna have to come up with some smart ways to get around that if they want to avoid having that happen to them.
My main fear around paralyzing touch is that uh, by the time the party realizes they need to do something about it, it's too late.
Yeah, there may be 3 paralyzed characters in the party.
And like, why would you ever let them go as a lich? That would be a stupid idea. You just keep reapplying it, right? So what's the party going to do then? Some people have said, well, then that's an excuse for the wizard to cast freedom of movement, but freedom of movement doesn't stop paralyzing touch. At least rules as written. You can rule it as a DM that paralyzing touch is magic, so therefore it cannot inflict the paralyzed condition on someone under the effects of freedom of movement, the freedom of movement spell. But rules as written, it's just an attack.
Yeah.
There's very few ways to actually prevent it.
There are more
To the point where
specific spells that I think do remove the paralyzed condition.
Lesser Restoration does, but you can't like put. It's not a buff you can put on somebody that stops them
Correct.
from receiving it. It's a band-aid.
Lesser
And you can
Restoration
do
is
it
pretty
to one
good though,
target.
because they changed it to a
Yeah.
bonus action casting. So
Yeah. It's just because you only have one bonus action if you have 3 paralyzed party members. You can only save one.
true. It's definitely an
Um,
additional hurdle that the players will have to get around.
I almost wish it had been a saving throw. And just a saving throw.
Yeah.
Like half damage on a failure, but like I almost wish it had been a saving throw.
Really the nice part is I think just because of how the new stat block is designed, if you really wanted to make it a saving throw, just use the regular saving throw in the stat
Yeah.
block, because it's there
Oh, it's
plastered across it if you wanted to
yeah.
add it back
It's
in.
very customizable. And it's very easy to make minor tweaks like that, which I do appreciate.
This is a tiny thing that I want to point out, but I really like that some of these new monsters have a gear section in their stat blocks.
Yes.
Like, just knowing that the Lich has a component pouch lets me know as a dungeon master that they can cast any of these spells that have components, as long as they don't have a gold piece cost to them.
Yeah.
So I don't have
Well, and
to worry
also
about
just
that.
It helps with verisimilitude. Verisimilitude, I think that's the word. Immersion.
Yes.
It helps with immersion a little bit because it is kind of jarring when you kill a mage, and as a wizard, you go, "I want their spellbook," and the DM has to turn to you and say, "It doesn't have one." Whereas here, this gives an in-universe explanation of maybe the Lich doesn't have its spellbook on it or whatever, but it was casting its spells using a component pouch.
Oh, I do want to mention too, because in the new stat block they have removed the turn resistance trait from the old Lich had, but I understand the reason they did that is because they changed how turn undead works with the new cleric. So now it's supposed to give undead creatures I believe the frightened and incapacitated conditions.
Yeah, they're incapacitated. Well, so frightened, and while they're frightened, they're incapacitated or they have to take a certain course of action. I can't
Yes.
quite remember.
So now that the since the Lich is just immune to the frightened condition, it just doesn't affect them anymore. Or at least
Yeah,
that, or at least that portion of it doesn't.
I'm pretty sure the entirety of that feature is reliant on the frightened condition, and probably very intentionally.
Yes,
Um,
I do feel like that's
uh,
intentional.
yeah, and it is almost an upgrade in some ways because having the Lich, if you can manipulate its saving throw enough, turn tail and run,
Yeah,
is very anticlimactic.
it is also it's very like in my mind it's very on par for the Lich to just say no, I'm not gonna run away from you. You can't scare me unless I'm getting
Yeah.
beat to death by
Yeah, well, it's under the DM's control to decide when they actually go, okay, I'm losing, I need to leave.
Now, there are a number of spells that have actually been removed from the new Lich stat block, but they have added Chain Lightning, and they did add in that Fireball and Lightning Bolt are upcasted to 5th level, which I do like.
At will.
Yes, and those are there's a lot of at-will spells in the stat block as well.
Yeah. And I think that really sells the fantasy of the Lich of this extremely powerful spellcaster who can just every round cast a 5th level spell without it, again, taking up as much space as the old stat block did.
I also like that Animate Dead is located in its actions. So does that mean it can cast Animate Dead as an action now? Because it's
I
normally a
thought
1 minute
so, but
casting.
no. So there's actually a new section in the how to use a stat block
Mm-hmm.
entry that talks about I think it's under actions.
Oh yeah, it doesn't
Spell
cast it.
casting.
Yep.
Casting times of 1 minute plus. If a spell has a casting time of 1 minute or more, yet is listed in the spell casting action, the monster doesn't cast the spell in just one action unless the action's description states otherwise. So unless it has that little brackets next to it that says
Oh, that's
as an
kind of
action.
that's kind of sad for me. I really wish it could just cast Animate Dead as an action and
Yeah, I don't know
raise.
why they didn't just say
I
it
would
changes the casting time.
honestly, I would just run it that way because just being able to raise 3 undead or 3 dead bodies as an action, I really don't see that being much of an issue. It's just making 3 minions, which are zombies or skeletons. And it's sacrificing its multi-attack to do that.
Yeah. And I guess the idea is it will do this ahead of a fight
I mean, yeah.
rather than during it. But
It's at least nice that they kept it in their repertoire.
yes. Yeah, I think the only thing left we have to mention, we have 2 things, yes. It's necrotic resistance got upgraded.
Yes, it's now immunity, which I prefer.
Yes, I think the reason it was resistance initially, like the thematic reason, was that they're still of the undead types, they're the most still alive. Like they're using other people's souls to kind of keep their own maintained. And so life disrupting energy can still affect them a little bit,
Yeah.
but because they're not fully alive, it doesn't. But also, if you really think about it, there are plenty of undead monsters where that could apply to that had necrotic immunity. So that's bullshit. And I'm glad that it got upgraded.
The only other massive change. Well, actually, I did notice that I didn't write this down, but the Lich knows all languages. It used to know only 6.
Oh,
which is kind of interesting. I just noticed that now.
well, I guess when you have 21 intelligence,
Yeah.
it's just why not?
True. But really, the only other interesting change is Spirit Jar versus the Rejuvenation trait.
Yeah.
So
Um,
Spirit Jar is more of a mechanical effect in the stat block now. And it does work pretty much exactly like the Rejuvenation trait did with the phylactery. But it's just word. It has a little less amount of words.
Yeah, I think Spirit Jar has less characters than Rejuvenation does. And I don't remember what. I remember there was a cultural sensitivity reason as to why the name Phylactery changed to Spirit Jar.
Okay.
But I cannot remember for the life of me which culture.
Yeah.
But basically, they felt like it was a bit too close to real world beliefs, so changed it.
Well, that's more of a mechanical change than anything. If you still wanted to call it a phylactery, I don't see why you couldn't.
Yeah, Wizards of the Coast aren't. It's not like Wizards of the Coast would send the Pinkertons round to your house because you used the word phylactery.
Yeah. Just check outside the window real quick. But honestly, it doesn't really bother me that they changed the name of certain things because mechanically they still have the exact same effects.
And you can call it what?
Yeah, exactly. You can call it whatever you want. But yeah, I mean, the only other thing that I'm really looking at is Frightening Gaze works the exact same way. They've just changed it to be the Fear spell, which is actually better because Fear is a cone and it can affect more creatures.
Yeah, it also saves a lot of page space.
Yeah,
because they don't have to repeat the same mechanics. They can just reference where they've already done the thing that they would say here.
Yeah, it's just a lot cleaner is what I'm getting from these stat blocks. They're so clean and they're very precise about what abilities they are presenting. And
yeah,
I kind of just enjoy looking at the new stat blocks in a way. They're just very nice to look at.
It does have a knock-on effect that I think was unintentional, but it's still very interesting. Where, for example, like the Satyr species has its magic resistance trait that originally was seen as super powerful because it gave you advantage against all magical effects. And then it got nerfed in Monsters of the Multiverse to be just against spells, and that was around a time where monsters were using spells less and getting magical actions that were not spells, did not have any of the mechanics of spells, but were still clearly magical in nature.
Yeah.
Now, those features are actually more powerful than ever, because not only are we going back to using mostly spells, but features that were not spells now are.
And that's actually, I'm just thinking that particular trait is going to be really powerful against things like Counterspell.
Yeah. Well, and also the Spell Guard Shield,
you know,
which gives you advantage on saving throws against spells. The Spell Turning Ring, Like,
Yeah, there's a lot. It's definitely a lot more applicable than it used to be, which is nice to see.
and I think that was an accident, but I'm going to class it
Yeah,
as a happy accident because
I
I actually quite like
yes,
that.
I believe it was. It may have been intended, but we don't know. It's definitely nice to see
Mm,
that they went in that direction, though. All right, are you ready to move on to the Pit Fiend?
I think I am.
All right. Well, there's the Pit Fiend. Got two quite different design
Yeah,
choices.
I actually think I prefer the 2014 art
They
because
they
it's
they
just
are
more
very different.
intimidating.
They're both very, very different.
Yeah. It's not that the 2024 art is bad, don't get me wrong, it's masterfully made. It just looks a bit goofy to me.
Yeah.
I think it's taking inspiration from that movie where what was it? Tim Curry played Satan. Like
Yes.
it reminds me of that.
Yes. I do know what you're talking about. It's a lot more humanoid than the older version. I do think some of the design choices on the new art are meant to just really speak to what the stat block can do in a way, because like you got
Mhm.
they got the fiery mace and stuff like that.
Yeah, and there are some like interesting design choices that I quite like having that belt of skulls
Yes,
is
that's
quite nice.
mm-hmm.
Having armor of any or clothing of any kind really is quite nice. Clearly shown on the 2014 art, it's not entirely clear whether he's actually got pants on.
True. Now we know that he has a skirt.
Yes.
Uh, yeah, but
Anyway,
yeah, regardless of what we actually think of the art, the stat blocks are quite different,
yes.
in significant ways.
Yeah. Although, to be honest, on the back end, at least compared to the Lich, there
Yeah,
isn't huge changes.
true. They're not
Um,
that different. Looking at it
Obviously,
mechanically, yeah,
hit points have gone up.
AC
Not
went up
just
slightly.
yeah. Actually, AC went down overall because it lost saving throw proficiencies.
Oh, you're right. I'm thinking of just mechanically the AC is higher, and the actual stat block.
Yeah. Um. So in the 2014 Lich Pit Fiend,
Yeah, yes, we moved.
we it was actually fairly balanced. It both its offensive and defensive CR was 22.
Okay,
Um,
pretty close.
Obvious. Sorry, go on.
I said that was pretty close.
Yeah. Obviously, its effective hit points were being increased by its immunities a
Mhm.
decent bit, and also by its fear aura a decent bit. So it had an effective hit points of 375, and its extra save proficiencies were giving it an effective AC of 24. Did I get that right? I don't think I got that right.
Yeah, I think that's.
No,
Or,
I think it would
mm,
be effective AC 21 actually.
yes. Yeah,
Plus magic resistance for 23.
with the saving throws, it would.
Yeah, because it's only got 3. Um, yeah, so plus magic resistance for 21. And its average damage per round was 141. And one fun little quirk from at least in 2014 that I always found interesting about the Pit Fiend. Fun fact: it was the best shape change or true polymorph shape you could select, because in 2014 both those spells prevented you from taking legendary actions, which to a lot of
Oh,
CR20 stat blocks was important to meeting their CR20 CR.
yeah, and this one doesn't need them.
The Pit, yeah, the Pit Fiend was the only one that just raw met its CR20 without legendary actions, which as a creature to fight actually made it less threatening than other CR20s because it didn't have the action economy to keep up with a party. That was nice to turn into.
The devil of Dominion,
Um,
indeed.
yeah. In 2025, most things have gone up. Its challenge rating is calculated at 24, with an offensive CR of 23 and a defensive CR of 24. This is mostly coming from legendary resistances, higher base HP,
Yeah,
obviously its fear aura, magic resistance buff, and its base buff to AC. I think it lost a saving throw proficiency.
it did. It
Yeah.
lost con saves.
And that AC buff got put back into raw AC.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the +2 AC comes from. And its offensive power went up to 163 DPR. Almost entirely because of its new Hellfire spellcasting action,
Yeah,
which is fascinating.
it is fascinating. It is quite fascinating.
Because I was betting they were going to give this legendary actions, but they
I
gave it
thought
this instead.
I know. I thought for sure it would end up gaining legendary actions, but they did not go that route whatsoever.
No. Instead, now as an action, it can just cast Fireball twice.
Yeah, twice in the same action, which is
Yeah, or Fireball and hold person at 7th level,
Yeah.
which is what, 3 targets?
I believe so.
5th, 6th, 7th, yeah, 3 targets.
Yeah, or Wall of Fire and Fireball, which is probably just
Yes.
as scary. But
Yeah, and I think the most effective use is, at least in terms of DPR, is Fireball and Wall of Fire.
probably because that's both damage and crowd control in a way.
Yeah, and sustained damage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it gained legendary resistances that it didn't have before.
That's true, and it gained 4 of them, which is quite a lot.
Yeah. And considering in 2014 the highest you'd get up to is 3.
I guess it really doesn't need the con save proficiency since it has 4 legendary resistances.
Yeah, it also just has a really high base bonus of +7 anyway.
Yeah, it does have a significant bonus just to begin with, so I'm not that worried that it lost it.
Yeah. Especially with advantage on most saving throws it will make.
Exactly. It's
One thing they did do. Sorry, go on.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say one thing they did do that I don't think we wrote down, but is very interesting to mention, is they collapsed the tail and claw attack into Devilish Claw.
Oh yes, you're right.
And a lot of samey, repetitive attack options got crouched down. Like on a lot of dragons, they have, instead of claw, bite, tail, they just have rend, because they're all basically the same attack.
Mm-hmm. They're just different damage types, essentially.
Yeah.
Which I honestly don't mind. I think it really cleans up these stat blocks quite a bit.
It certainly takes up less space, and also means you don't have to look all across its stat block for basically the same information.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I also like the... I was going to say, I also like the variety of different damage types that each of its attacks are dealing. So,
yeah.
I mean, even if your player characters are resistant to multiple damage types, it's very likely that a lot of this damage is going to get through just because you got, there's like 5 different types of damage coming at you, essentially.
Well, yeah, because piercing, poison, necrotic, force, fire. Yeah, 5.
Yeah, there's just a lot. There's a lot happening there.
And part of that is they got rid of the magic weapons trait, and this is not new to the 2024 Monster Manual, but it is new compared to the 2014 Monster Manual.
Yeah.
Where they got rid of the magic weapons trait, and replaced it with changing the base damage type of the weapon.
I actually like that they got rid of the magic weapons crate because it almost
didn't do anything.
no, it almost never applied because player characters didn't really have resistance or any type of protection against magical attacks somewhat.
Heavy Armor Master is the only example I can think of.
Yeah.
Oh, and I guess the Armor of Immunity.
Yeah, the old war cleric had its capstone was it got resistance to non-magical bludgeoning, piercing, slashing, but
it's so rare.
yes.
It basically never came up and was more or less a world building thing, especially when it came to creature versus creature. But since monsters have lost non-magical resistance or immunity, it would now be a completely useless feature.
Yeah, it just doesn't matter anymore. There's also nothing that is immune to bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing damage. So
no,
you don't have to worry about dealing normal physical damage.
Yeah. Although its bite is actually an example of what we were talking about earlier, where some monsters still have a saving throw baked into an attack.
Yes.
I think maybe I think especially because this also applies to the Bearded Devil, it's if they only make that attack once per round, it's okay. But if they make it more than once, it auto applies.
Yeah. And I think the reason it might also have a saving throw to it is because of the additional damage that the poison condition would apply in that case. Because the target does take poison damage if they fail to save because they're poisoned.
But for example, that was also true for the or unless they take the damage.
They do repeat. I think they take it as long as they're poisoned.
And takes 66 at the start of each of its turns, you're right. Which is also true in the 2014 stat block.
Correct. It didn't really change there.
No. It's more interesting that they could have made it like they could have made it so that the bite just does an extra 66 poison damage or whatever on the hit.
Yeah.
And then it automatically inflicts the poison condition until the start of the Pit Fiend's next turn, and while poisoned in this way, the creature can't regain hit points. They could have changed it like that, but they chose not to.
Yeah, which is interesting that they didn't, because I would think that they would have changed it to that particular wording, since a lot of other things they did do that.
Another thing to consider is obviously different people would have been given different stat blocks to revise. And it's entirely possible some of them weren't like they made certain design decisions after certain stat blocks were already done, or that person making the stat block didn't get told quickly enough and it was too late to go back and change it. So it's possible that it was a production line issue, but I would be very interested to know if it was an intentional choice.
Yeah. It probably was intentional on someone's part. Someone had to okay
it. Yes.
Really, the only other interesting changes that I can think of is the new Pit Fiend has skill proficiencies in both perception and persuasion, which is nice.
Which you didn't before.
Yeah. And then the diabolical restoration trait, which
was always a thing in terms of lore. It was just in the Pit Fiend's description, whereas now it's in the stat block.
Yeah, so you're not forgetting about it this time around, which I think is quite helpful.
It's also nice that because there are a load of different traits like that now in the game. The Rakshasa has it. I think a lot of fiends and celestials have it.
Yeah, the angels for sure have it.
And it's nice that it specifies the plane in which they return.
Yes. It also helps because now you know which monsters can come back to try to hurt the players for killing them.
Yes.
which is always fun to do.
Speaking of which,
Yes. Yeah, we need to talk about the next monster because the Rakshasa definitely has, I think, some of the most interesting design changes after looking
well,
through
the
the
fact
stat
that
block.
it can be more than just a cat.
Yes,
First of all, design in terms of visual.
yeah, I absolutely love that change that you could change the animal portion of the Rakshasa. I think that's really cool mechanically. It doesn't
Yeah.
it doesn't change the mechanics at all, but it's a really nice design
No.
choice.
Well, it also means that it makes it less predictable. And maybe even the Rakshasa could impersonate something like the Animal Lord, which can also appear as many different kinds of humanoid animal creatures.
Mm-hmm.
Because in 2014, once you knew what a Rakshasa was, you just, okay, look for cat, look for twisted hands. Whereas now it's more difficult to suss out exactly what it is.
I mean, the backwards hands are obviously still there, but it's not as easy to suss it out in certain ways. But I went back. Now you talk about the challenge rating differences, and then we'll get into the actual stat blocks because there are some significant changes here that I really want to talk about.
Yeah. So I think at face value, it seems like a lot of the Rakshasa's abilities got nerfed. Obviously, there's changes to limited magic immunity. It lost its non-magical immunity.
Mm-hmm.
But on the back end, it has been ostensively buffed.
Yes.
Because what I did was, I think I treated the old limited magic immunity as just damage immunity in terms of its CR and magic resistance. Which meant it effectively had double hit points, 220 instead of 110, an effective AC of 24 because of its base 16 plus 2 from... Oh no, I also treated it as having proficiency in all saving throws.
Yeah, because I've seen it. I think some people that have tried to work back the challenge range, I think some people give limited magic immunity like a +9 to AC mechanically.
Yeah, because it's +2 for magic resistance, +4 from proficiency in all saves, and then damage immunity, I think is how I worked it out.
That's a lot.
Which is very interesting. Yeah. And that meant that it had a defensive CR of 13. Which is I think it's one of the few monsters that's defensive CR matches its printed challenge rating. But its offensive CR was 4.
Yeah, it's very low.
To make up for the fact, right, that most spells just couldn't affect it. You had to be level 13 to cast one spell per day that did anything.
Yeah.
But the problem that this runs into is if your party has a single magical weapon, the Rakshasa is a joke.
Yeah.
Just a couple weeks ago, I was playing as a player in a game where we fought a Rakshasa, and although the spellcasters, because we had a wizard, we had a bard, we had a cleric, were all floundering, the fighter with a +1 sword beat it on his own because it couldn't do anything to him.
Yeah, I mean, as long as that creature has a good alignment and a magical weapon, it's just destroying. Oh yeah,
from magical weapons wielded by a good creature, which is very bad for him because I was a paladin with a rapier.
Yeah, exactly. As long as you meet the requirement, you can just turn the Rakshasa into Swiss cheese.
Yeah. Whereas the new 2024 stat block, although it's a greater magic resistance, is not as powerful as its limited magic immunity. It's still giving it a decent buff, I think I treat it as proficiency in all saving throws and magic resistance again, but this time removed the damage immunity.
I
Um,
went ahead and showed this new stat block to my friends who are my normal players, and we were ranting about how much powerful greater magic resistance might be to limited magic immunity, because
yeah,
greater magic resistance doesn't care what level the spell cast is. It just automatically
nope,
succeeds on saving throws, and attack rolls automatically miss it.
yes, which
What?
could be effectively half damage, right,
Yeah,
from all spells.
yeah. I was thinking mechanically the best the best spellcaster to fight a Rakshasa might now be the Evocation Wizard, because they can get
Yes,
cantrips through.
yeah, potent
Yeah,
cantrip.
they
Yeah,
can get,
yeah,
because of potent cantrip.
yeah.
But
But yeah,
it's a humongous design change to that one trait, and it's I think it's going to be
it,
more often effective than the
yeah,
older
and it
one.
also, I think, it actually makes the Rakshasa representative of its CR, because whereas before you
Mm-hmm.
could not introduce it before. Well, in theory, you couldn't introduce it before 13th level, especially if you had a caster heavy party. But
Mm-hmm.
if you introduced it after 13th level, it was a joke.
There
Because
are,
it couldn't do anything.
yeah, I mean, there are benefits now to the change, because you can introduce it earlier, and spellcasters are still going to be able to do AoE damage to it, but other than that, they're still going to be as
Yeah,
effective as they originally were.
yeah, and that's true even if they have 9th level spells. So defensively, with that plus the bump to its AC, just from 16 to 17, and it's almost double hit points
Yes,
naturally.
a lot of hit points.
Yeah, its defensive CR has gone up 1 to 14, but the biggest boon to the Rakshasa is its offensive CR went up by 12 from 4 to 16.
Yeah, it's just having the increased damage for its that cursed touch attack, and the fact that it can now make
Increased
3
damage,
of them. Yeah,
increased damage, increased hit, 1 extra attack, Baleful
yeah.
command
Baleful
as well.
command is completely new, and
Yeah,
it's a 30-foot emanation. That's a lot of range for something like that. And
yeah.
it's putting conditions on targets as well on a failure, which is,
Frightened and incapacitated. It's
yeah.
kind of like the inverse of Turn Undead almost.
Mm-hmm. It is, in a way.
Um so yeah, even though it's limited to magic immunity, I think is stronger than greater magic resistance, because you only have a certain number of spell slots over 6th level, no matter what your level is.
Yes.
And the fact that below that it just could not do anything, like it could walk right through a wall of force.
Now you can, it's just not
Whereas
as effective.
yeah, and you can still subject it to the effects of wall spells, for example.
Mm-hmm.
You can still stop it with a wall of force now, whereas before you couldn't, because there's no saving throw when it comes to wall of force.
True.
But I think the really interesting design change to me is removing the piercing vulnerability's reliance on alignment, and just in
Yeah.
general trying to make alignment completely non-mechanical, completely flavorful.
It's really interesting to
And
me that
replace
they
that.
went with a first level spell.
Yes. I think the idea is you're not guaranteed to have the bless spell in the party, which
Yeah,
you absolutely are.
you
I've
should.
yet to play in a party that doesn't have the bless spell, but let's face, for the sake of argument, you don't. Then this vulnerability won't come up. But I get it's also not guaranteed anyone in your party will do piercing damage, even if you have the bless
Yes.
spell.
It's essentially a double condition vulnerability.
Yes.
Her double conditional.
And I think with its buff to main HP and the effects of greater magic resistance, I think that's fine.
It also
It's
gained
actually
condition immunities, which it didn't have before.
right.
Yeah, charmed and frightened.
Yeah, charmed and frightened. Which makes it immune to one of the paladins has abjure foes, doesn't it? I think it's the Vengeance Paladin. That basically turn undead, but for a greater array of enemies.
Yeah, I think the paladin might have a. I think at 9th level they just get a feature called
Oh
Abjure
no, you're
Foes.
right. Yeah. And it is frightened. So just a number of creatures, any creature type, or else they have the frightened condition and have to run away. So yeah, so it's immune to that.
I will say another thing that they did to the new version that I like is that they removed the spell True Seeing from the spellcasting trait and just gave the Rakshasa True Sight.
Which just makes more sense.
Yeah, it's just something that they have now, which you don't have to worry about casting it every day.
And of course they would. Why wouldn't they?
Yeah, they would. They would. So of course they're gonna have it active. But now it's just something that they have rather than something that they have to do.
And once again, of course, they have fiendish restoration, like the Pit Fiend, which does basically the same thing.
Yeah, it works essentially the same way.
Yeah. I think. Yeah.
Yeah. There's definitely a lot of design changes to it, and they're very interesting.
Yeah, and it is a much more usable monster.
Yeah,
now.
it's a lot more effective offensively. It's still as effective defensively. It's probably going to last a little bit longer than it used to.
Yes.
But,
and you can actually use it in the encounter building rules of the base game rather than it being this weird outlier.
Exactly. I think it's just much. I think it's a much better design, honestly, than the older version.
Yeah,
because it's now something that can actually be fought against at all levels. Rather than
the 2014 Rakshasa definitely gives me like homebrew.
Yeah,
like boss that shows up once and never again, has a main gimmick that you have to figure out how to overcome.
It has a lot of homebrew energy.
Yeah, that like is good at a table, but not good in a monster book. That's supposed to slot into a pre-established encounter building system easily.
It did get a tiny increase as well to its initiative score, but it's not crazy different.
It got proficiency.
Yeah, it got proficiency, which is nice, but there's still some players that will possibly beat it out of initiative.
Well, yeah, just have a higher fucking dexterity modifier than it does in the alert feat.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the new Rakshasa looks pretty good mechanically.
Yeah.
Alright, we have one last creature to look at, and I really wanted to look at this one because I've never really looked at Sphinx stat blocks before, but they completely changed how a lot of these work. I mean, artistically they look almost completely different. Like they've completely rehauled these. Because
and I think they're taking inspiration from a broader range of like mythical sphinxes than just well, it's not even true, like a very rudimentary idea of Egyptian sphinxes.
Yeah, because they call sphinxes in the new monster manual the collectors and keepers of secrets, which I think fits the design aspect of them pretty well. And
Yeah.
they're also all sphinxes now are celestials. They used to be monstrosities, which I actually appreciate that they've changed the creature type because monstrosities didn't seem to fit before.
It was just animal plus thing,
Yeah,
I think was the
yeah,
thinking.
it is. It
But
was just
they've
animal plus
always
thing.
been servants of gods. So like it did not make
Yes,
sense.
it makes a lot more sense for them to be celestials now, since
Yes.
that is their essential goal. And they also
I do.
changed the names of a lot of these stat
Yes.
blocks.
Well, they
Uh,
added new ones,
they did. Well, they
but
did. They did add some new ones. Two new ones, I believe.
two new ones. Yeah. I do appreciate the move away from having Gynosphinx being the women and Androsphinx being the men, and having
Yes.
a 6 CR difference between them.
Yeah.
um, I appreciate that it's more about their function than their
Yeah.
gender.
And the names are a lot more interesting as well. You got the Sphinx of Valor, you got the Sphinx of Lore, the Sphinx of Secrets, and the what's the CR1 version that you can take as a
Wonder.
familiar? Yeah, the Sphinx of Wonder, which are nice. I absolutely love there's a
And they
Sphinx familiar that you could take as a warlock.
Yeah. And they're more invocative, really, because you hear that and you just go, okay, so the Sphinx of Wonder is the little baby Sphinx that doesn't know anything yet. It's really curious. It wants to know so much. Instant personality. Sphinx of Secrets. You know, it's just started to pick up some bits and bobs. It might know a few secrets about one specific subject. But when it becomes a Sphinx of Lore, where it's like hoarded so much knowledge, it's a walking encyclopedia,
Mm-hmm.
versus the Sphinx of Valor, which more seems to me as like the guardians, or if a god needs a Sphinx to go into battle, it might become a Sphinx of Valor.
Yeah, and they're not only the art has taken a completely different approach to these creatures because they just look so different from the older versions. But
Yeah,
these stat blocks are also, I think, I I personally have never used a Sphinx stat block in one of my games, just
I used them
because
once.
they weren't really interesting at all. But
Yeah, I used them once, and I think the most interesting thing, I used them together, an Andrew Sphinx and a Gyno Sphinx. I think the most interesting thing they had was their lair actions,
mhm,
which obviously are gone,
yeah,
and the Andrew Sphinx's raw mechanic, because I think it is still the only mechanic in the game that escalates each time you repeat the action.
yeah, that's really why I wanted to talk about the Sphinx of Valor, because its roar is such a unique mechanic that I feel like it's really worth talking about. Now that this is a stat block that I can actually look at and think, oh, that's really cool. I want to design an encounter around that.
Yeah.
So I think realistically there aren't that many changes to the creature itself.
Well, yeah, its AC and HP are the same. It's I think the big changes are obviously to its spellcasting, like with every other monster, and the fact that it now has legendary resistance where it didn't before, and the changes to its legendary action options. Because in 2014, its CR changed depending on the attack pattern you used. If you used its actions to just make claw attacks, and used its legendary actions to use spellcasting, or vice versa, then its CR was 14. Upcasting, I think it was Flame Strike as to the highest level it could. It was 15 if it used its action to roar each round, and its legendary actions to cast Flame Strike, or if you had it roar with each of its actions, and then on the first round cast 6th level Flame Strike, and then on repeating rounds attack paralyzed creatures from the second roar, then its CR was 16. Still not quite hitting the 17 CR it was printed with, but I think it was printed like that because it was the only monster in the 2014 monster manual that I know of that could cast a leveled spell using legendary actions. Because even the Lich only got cantrips, and
Yeah.
also obviously its lair action, which was incredibly powerful, that let it take you through time. So I think it's got overestimated a little bit because of those things. But having used it, it did not feel like a CR17 at all. I'm not even sure it felt like a CR16, to be honest. I probably would have printed it as 15 if it wasn't for its time-altering lair action. Whereas, sorry, go on.
No, you're good. I think it may. I mean, it's definitely different because they've changed the legendary actions that it can do
Yes.
to make them a little bit more applicable in every situation,
And
and
consistent.
consistent. And its multi-attack now allows it to use roar, at least for those first 3
Yes.
turns,
Which is incredibly useful and helpful. Because now you don't have to necessarily choose between waiting 2 turns to do something really impactful. Now, right from turn 1, you can roar, which frightens, doesn't necessarily do a whole lot. Frightened it's kind of debilitating, but it's not the most debilitating condition you could apply, especially at this level, where like paladins have their aura of courage, so will be immune to it.
Yeah, it's like a minor debilitating effect.
Yeah. But on top of that, also being able to make 2 claw attacks is very helpful, as represented by the fact that its CR backend went from 16 to 19. Its defenses haven't gone up a whole lot. I think it's mostly the new legendary resistances are giving it a lot of effective HP. I think it's 40 more effectively, which is, but that's also because part of it is the trade-off of having lost bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing immunity.
It did gain 2 new resistances, and
yes,
interestingly, it swapped its wisdom and charisma scores, but it's now using wisdom for all of its saving throw calculations. So, just an interesting mechanical change.
Well, I think it was also strange because they used charisma for very little in the old stat block, and wisdom for most of its DCs. Like, because it was a cleric, right? So it cast cleric spells using wisdom. Its raw used wisdom proficiency. Used the same save as its spell casting. So it makes more sense to have its highest mental score be its spellcasting score.
Yeah, and the Sphinx of Valor is actually, I think, the only wisdom caster from the Sphinxes, because at least the other 2 before it are intelligence, from what I see. But
Yes, and I think that was the same in 2014 as well.
yes,
I'm pretty sure the Gyno Sphinx was a wizard.
but the Sphinx of Valor isn't really a intelligent creature. It's more focused on well, it's the Sphinx of Valor. It's focused on combat in a way.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Its offenses, obviously, because it can claw, and roar, and has more consistent legendary actions as well. And I also think the damage of its claws has gone up. I think it went from the 2d10 to 46. Yeah.
Yes, it did go up slightly.
All that working in tandem has meant its CR its offensive CR is now 22. which is 4 over the 2014 counterpart, leading to a final CR, calculated CR of 19. I think Flame Strike is gone from its spellcasting action. Yeah.
Yes, they lost
And
Sacred Flame, Spare the Dying Command, Lesser Restoration, Tongue's Banishment, Freedom of Movement, and Flame Strike, which is a lot.
yeah,
But
but obviously that's made up for by being able to roar as part of the multi-attack,
yeah,
eventually doing that 8d10 thunder damage on top of 2 claw attacks, potentially against paralyzed targets.
and for the legendary actions, they combine both the Claw and the Teleport into one singular legendary action. So
That only
that's
costs 1.
yeah, that's pretty potent.
You know, something else I just noticed, which is another reason why the Sphinx of Valor is, although on paper not necessarily that much more powerful, is so much more powerful. In 2014, the paralyzed condition was reliant on the targets being frightened, which, as we explained, like even the
Oh,
first level spell Heroism is enough to get immunity to that. Whereas in 2024, it is not reliant on them having the frightened condition.
yeah, that's a lot better
It just
change.
paralyzes.
And the third roar deals damage as well, which is quite nice.
Yes. Gives them the prone condition as well.
Yeah, I think this is the only creature I've seen that has had a progressive effect worked into one
Yes.
of its actions.
I
It's
think
it's
across the entirety of official D&D, not just the 2014 Monster Manual, I can't think of a single other officially published monster that has a mechanic remotely like this.
yeah, it's very unique, and I really kind of like it because it changes what it's doing every turn as
I
well.
almost wish it was the standard, a build up to a crescendo rather than a resource battle of attrition.
Yeah.
But then we're starting to talk about completely changing the core of D&D, which is obviously not the purpose of the new Monster Manual.
I also I want to take just to mention the Weight of Years legendary action is very interesting because I mean one,
Yeah.
it's entirely new, but exhaustion works
I,
completely different in the 2024 rules now.
I think it's inspired by that lair action I mentioned, either the lair action I mentioned earlier, where it could choose to, I think, take people forward or backwards in time up to a year, and only
Yeah.
Sphinx was aware of this change. I think Weight of Years is inspired by that lair action. It's also, interestingly enough, because its effect is so potent, giving you an exhaustion level and increasing. Oh, sorry. While the target has any exhaustion levels,
Yep.
it appears 3d 10 years older, so it doesn't actually
Yeah,
age
it's just
you.
a mechanical effect. Or
Yeah,
it's
or a flavorful effect.
Yeah, flavorful effect.
But it has the lowest DC on the stat block, DC 16 rather than DC 20. Which shouldn't be possible. Because it's proficiency bonus plus 8, which is 14 plus a stat, so it would need to have a
Or
plus
it's
2
plus
stat.
6. It's plus 6 proficiency.
Yes, sorry, what did I say?
You said plus 8.
Sorry, so it's 6 plus 8, because 8 plus proficiency bonus.
Yes.
So 14. So it would need to have a plus 2 stat to make a 16. So that DC is just plucked out of thin air. It's not based on anything.
Oh, it is what it is.
It could be an error, but I'm going to assume it's intentional, and because it's an exhaustion-giving effect, they decided to lower the DC.
It could be an error. I think the one of the Sphinxes beforehand does have the same legendary action. I'd have to check the book though to see if that's an actual error.
Maybe the Sphinx of Lore.
Yeah, I think the Sphinx of Lore has the same legendary action.
Yes. 12 plus 4. Yeah. Because that would have a DC of six. So I think it's a copy paste error.
Oh, okay.
Is what it looks like to me. I think it's using the DC of the Sphinx of Law rather than the DC of the Sphinx of Valor.
Okay. In which case, you just need to change it to a DC 20, probably.
Yes. With a book this size and on the production schedule, it seems like it had. There's gonna be errors like this.
Yeah. Which, it's just something that's gonna happen. But yeah, I mostly wanted to look at this stat block just because the roar mechanic is so unique to this particular creature.
One thing we didn't mention on the stat blocks that we looked at, but I'm going to mention as an aside.
Yeah.
Because what you're saying reminded me of, like, there's a lot of interesting mechanics in 5e that are one-offs, and I wish weren't.
Yeah.
Where they only appear once, like this. Or like the Frost Salamander, where it has vulnerability to fire damage, but has a trait where if it takes fire damage, it instantly regains its breath weapon. But one thing I was elated to see in the new book is in Big B's Glory of the Giants, we had, like, you know, the giant runes, where it was an object that gave the giant a buff or access to a particular action, and the party could target and destroy that object, which had the rune on it, to remove that ability or buff from the giant. And we have that in the 2024 Monster Manual. That mechanic sees a return with the Night Hag and the Arcanoloth.
Yeah.
There's probably more that I don't remember.
There may be a few more, but those are the two that I recall.
And I'm happy that for once a mechanic hasn't been abandoned.
Yes. I particularly like it in the Arcanoloth. I think the Arcanoloth is so cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are just the four creatures that I wanted to look at, just because they were quite unique, and they each do something quite different. But
Yeah.
that's really all I wanted to do in today's video. I really appreciate you joining me, Crimson. Thank you so much for taking
Absolutely
the time
no
out to talk about
worries.
these stat blocks.
Yeah, no.
Please tell my audience where they can find you and your content, even though I'm sharing it on the screen right now.
Yes, absolutely. So I am one of two people in charge of the Crimson Fox Games YouTube channel, where I make DM focused video design videos, currently focusing on monster design, although I've made a couple videos about encounter balance and lair actions and things like that. And yeah, some of it's homebrew. I try to give DMs new tools at the end of every video that they can use in their own games. But some of it is just talking about pre-existing design and my thoughts on it, and how I would tweak it if you gave me reins to the game, which you should never do. And one thing I do actually want to say before we close out the video, because with all the CR calculations that I've been making on the back end, here obviously talking about how the Lich is calculated as CR 25, the Rakshasa is calculated as CR 15. Not a single stat block we talked about today came out at its listed CR. And so if you, at home, want to keep using the CR calculation rules, because there's no new ones, unfortunately.
Yeah, and we know that Wizards of the Coast has indeed changed something, because they calculate differently, but they won't share us. They won't share the rules with us for whatever reason.
Yeah. My rule of thumb currently is I think CR 10 or lower is basically unchanged. It's still the same, so that's fine. But when you get to CR 11 and high, like CR 11 to 16, whatever the calculator gives you, lower it by 1 or 2, and then compare, and you figure out exactly how much to lower it by comparing it to stat blocks of the same CR. in the 2024 Monster Manual. And once you get to CR20 or even CR7, no, yeah,
Yeah,
sorry,
you're right.
CR11 to 19 adjust by 1 or 2. CR20 or above, it goes up to differences of like 4 or 5. And again, you adjust based on comparing what you have calculated to official stat block.
Yeah, and Wizards of the Coast definitely uses a different mechanic to calculate their challenge ratings than we do, because
They
we
always have.
I know we have to assume their math is correct, but we don't have anything to fix our math, so we just have to kind of figure it out on our own. But yeah, there's a lot of great content on Crimson Fox Games. There is a collab video for us on his channel if you're interested in another video kind of like this one, but obviously quite different.
Yeah, where we talk about the tiers of play, how to what they really mean and how to use them in world building.
And a lot of fun, so please go check that out. But yeah, that's gonna be it for today's video. Thank you so much. I appreciate you helping me out with this one.
No worries. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome anytime.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you all so much for watching. We appreciate it, and we'll catch you all in the next video. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.